Ex-wife demanded a divorce but now calls my new partner a homewrecker and blames me for her mental struggles, even threatening self-harm. My marriage lasted almost 10 years, with another 4 years together before that. She was the only woman I'd ever been intimate with, and we had one child together. From the start, expressing my emotions was always a struggle, and my ex excelled at pointing that out. No matter how many times I tried to be better, putting my feelings into words, trying to meet her expectations, I never quite measured up. House too messy, her idea of tidy was more like a hospital operating room, not enough proper hobbies or friends in her eyes, and even when she said she forgave me for something, it turned out she hadn't. I was always a disappointment in some way. She didn't like being touched, and didn't like touching me, something that mattered to me more than I realized at the time. Eventually I found out we'd basically had pity sex for the last few years, that she'd only gone along with it so I wouldn't sulk. I can't remember the last time we'd really touched each other. And through it all, she refused to seek help, even though it was obvious she should see a professional. Looking back, the things I did for her, the efforts to make her happy, all felt forced, acts to avoid being chewed out for getting reservations wrong, or some other failure. Our child, I think, was the only real glue holding us together that long. Then, in the summer of 24, she suddenly told me she wanted a divorce. She said I'd ruined her life and hated me. It was so blunt, so out of nowhere, but she was adamant. We tried therapy, made it through 2 sessions before she demanded we end it and insisted there was no point trying to save the marriage. I fought for us. I believed there was something worth saving if we were both willing to put in the effort. She never budged. With every attempt I made to open up, to explain how I felt, she only dug her heels in. That fall, I hit rock bottom. I was overwhelmed by self-loathing, convinced I had no self-worth. I was losing the only person I'd ever truly loved. Finally, at the turn of the year 24-25, she said we needed to end it for good. I've never cried so hard in my life, and I'm not proud to admit it. We messaged our friends and families about our breakup but, legally, we were still married and shared the house, separate rooms since fall. Yet even then, she'd find reasons to yell at me, like the time I missed my promised return home by 15 minutes because of something completely out of my control. She flew off the handle, telling me again how I'd ruined her life. That was the last straw. I decided to move out. The day I moved, she was already on Tinder, and made sure I knew it. To be fair, I'd created a free Tinder account back in December 24, during the darkest lows of my self-worth, just to see if anyone would be interested in me when the dust settled. I only wanted to check if I could ever feel attractive again after all this. It wasn't about actually meeting someone. But come spring 25, I started to put myself back together. I began dating very casually, just to have company and talk to people, something I'd never really done before. Then, almost by accident, I met this amazing woman. Everything between us just clicked, the interests, the energy, our needs in a relationship. I was overwhelmed by how she genuinely found me interesting. It felt like I was finally being seen after years of invisibility and rejection. Meanwhile, I had tried several times to finalize the divorce, but my ex kept it lingering on paper under the guise of unfinished division of property and tax reasons, her issues, not mine. I was tired of fighting, so I focused on this new relationship, taking things slow, just enjoying being with someone who understood me. A few weeks went by and my ex found out through our child that I was seeing someone. She reached out, seemingly friendly, asking how I was and if I was dating, so she could wrap up the official divorce. I answered honestly, my first mistake. She absolutely lost her mind. She told me she'd been planning a grand gesture, a get-together and a letter about how she wanted a future for us. She sent me photos of the letter. I was speechless. How could she, after 10 months of refusing any reconciliation, of repeating she hated me and I'd ruined her life, suddenly claim she wanted me back? I told her that nothing in her actions had shown any hint of those feelings, and that I had to move on for my own sanity. She was the one who'd ended things so harshly. After that, it was pure chaos. Weeks of her cussing, calling me a cheater, calling the woman I was seeing a homewrecker, physically hitting me, shouting that I was a pig. All the drama you could expect. And suddenly, the division of property and tax excuses disappeared. She finalized the divorce without a second thought. Right away she started seeing someone new from Tinder and made a point to tell me how happy she was. She'd show off shirtless pictures of him when I picked up our child, brag about his car, rubbing it in at every opportunity. I took things slow with the incredible new woman in my life. We talked honestly about our expectations, how we'd both like our relationship to look. We figured things out together, step by step. I also made a point to keep her up to date on my ex's erratic behavior. But one thing stuck with me. On our first dates, I'd shared everything, how and why my marriage ended, how much pain I'd been through. She asked if my ex had ever shown signs of wanting to get back together, and at the time, I answered no, because that was the truth. But then came the letter, the cry for a future together, and, whether or not it was written before or after she knew I was dating, I'll never actually know. I didn't tell the awesome woman about that episode. I was too shaken and confused by it myself, and now I worry I should have told her. Even now, my ex is struggling in her own new relationship, can be sort of nice one moment, but then flips back to vicious, calling me a cheater, calling my partner a homewrecker. Meanwhile, I feel guilty for not disclosing everything to this great woman in my life, even though I've been honest about my status since the very first dates, including the fact that, technically, I was still married but the relationship ended at New Year's. To add to everything, my ex, whom I always suspected of undiagnosed mental health issues, repeatedly told me that when she killed herself, it would be because of me. One evening, during those chaotic weeks after the blow-up, she called in such distress I truly feared she'd harm herself. I went over, and found her not angry or threatening, but utterly broken. She asked me, "Don't you see anything in me anymore? How can you see something in her?" That cut deep. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the honest truth, that my feelings for this new, awesome woman were strong and growing, so I just sat with her, helpless against the spiral we'd once shared. And that's where I am now, moving forward, bit by bit, with someone who actually sees me, while untangling the wreckage of a past that refuses to go quietly. I was in a tricky spot once. When my relationship with my ex ended, things were hardly smooth. We share a child, so our lives inevitably remain intertwined, but there's a persistent, lurking tension that shadows every conversation. After our split, I moved forward and started dating an amazing woman. She is in every way who I wish I'd had, from the very start. Still, I couldn't be fully open about her to my ex because, almost immediately, my ex tried to stalk her, to dig up anything she could. The intensity of my ex's emotions became clear early on. I felt that, unless I said something like, "I wouldn't have been in a relationship with you if I didn't care for you," my ex might really hurt herself. I've always been terrified that my child could lose their mother because I failed to say the right words, to steer the conversation the right way. So I did play it right. I said what I felt I had to, not what I truly felt. My concern was never for getting back with my ex, it was always about ensuring my child still has a mother. But the past has a way of haunting me. Now, my ex uses those words as a threat, suggesting, "What if this awesome woman found out how you said you didn't have feelings for her? And how you acted like you'd choose me?" The implication hangs in the air that my ex could reach out and destroy what I'm building now, just by twisting my words or revealing private conversations from the early days of my new relationship. I've never explained to my ex why I chose my words so carefully back then. All I've shared is my gratitude that my child still has a mother. That's the only thing I truly still appreciate about my ex. She's a good mom. She finally received a diagnosis for her mental health issues and was put on medication, but she ended up stopping those because of the side effects. I find myself questioning everything. Am I the bad guy here? Did I somehow fail in my attempts to just be a decent person? Was what I did considered cheating? Could anyone possibly view the awesome woman as a homewrecker? And what should I even discuss with her? Does she need to know about the letter instance, the one time my ex tried to make it seem like we'd get back together, and that I immediately rejected? What I do know for certain, my feelings for my ex are as close to zero as can be. I have absolutely no desire to return to that relationship. That instance, one letter where my ex tried to reignite something, was cut off right away by me, and, honestly, my current partner knows nothing about it. Should I bring it up? Should I let her in on all this history and tangled context? It strikes me as I say all of this, I am far from perfect. I was no saint in my marriage. I could be distant, withdrawn, not truly present, something I recognized during my own therapy after the divorce. I still don't know whether those were the causes or consequences of our issues, but I'm working to unravel that, to make myself better. What I know now, with this incredible woman, is how real love and mutual respect should feel. And in this relationship, I genuinely could not be happier. Those old habits, being laconic, emotionally absent, they haven't reappeared. I feel like I've finally stepped into a relationship where I belong, but the ghosts of my past still sometimes reach their fingers toward the life I'm building. I ended up doing the one thing I've been avoiding because I was convinced it would blow up in my face. I sat my awesome woman down and told her everything I'd kept in the margins, the letter, the late night call where my ex was spiraling, and I said careful, half-true things to keep her safe, the threats to tell her what you really said. I expected the air to change, some mix of anger and the slow pullback I'd known for years. She didn't flinch, she just listened and asked me to read her the lines I was afraid would be used against me. I did. She looked at me and said, "You were trying to keep a crisis from getting worse. Thank you for telling me." That was it. The power that letter had over me evaporated like I'd been holding a match to wet paper. 2 days later my ex tested the waters anyway. She messaged my partner from a brand new account with fragments of our old conversations and a warning about what I was really like. We were sitting side by side on my couch when the first ping came in, and instead of my stomach sinking, we just looked at it together. I sent one message back through my own number. "Please keep all communication to the parenting app, only about our child." That was the beginning of a shift. I moved everything to our family wizard and put it in writing that exchanges would be in the parking lot of the police station down the road. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, because it was neutral ground and cameras exist. I was tired of being the only one who left those encounters shaking. It didn't prevent the first blow-up. She arrived with her Tinder guy, both of them recording me before I'd even unbuckled our kid. She started the same monologue, cheater, homewrecker, pig, and the new guy chimed in with a man-to-man speech about my failings. My kid's face went blank. I buckled them into my car without a word, put my phone on the dash with its camera quietly running, and we left. That night I wrote exactly what had happened in the app. No adjectives, just times and what was said. I attached the video. I told her we wouldn't be speaking in person at handoffs anymore. A line had to be drawn somewhere that wasn't my kid's ears. A week later the pendulum swung the other way. She called as I was making dinner and I picked up because something in the way it rang made my heart drop. She was crying so hard I couldn't understand her, only catching pieces. She couldn't do it, she couldn't breathe. I called the crisis line with the other phone and they sent a team to check on her. I stayed on the line until they knocked at her door and then I hung up and sat on the kitchen floor with the burner still buzzing in my hand. Our child ate noodles on a stool and asked why the stove was off. I told them we were going to have a picnic in the living room and we did, and I didn't mention their mom at all. She texted later, "I'm okay," then nothing. I slept on the couch with my phone face up and a glass of water untouched beside it. After that, something gave. She messaged that she was starting treatment again and had an appointment for DVT, said the side effects were bad but she'd stick it out this time. The tone of her messages shifted from jagged to flat. She apologized for the parking lot scene, which is not something I'd expected to read this year. It wasn't a sweeping mea culpa, just 4 words, that shouldn't have happened. For the first time since the new year, I believed she might not be trying to set the world on fire every time I took a step. That didn't stop the little fires. She posted a story on her socials with my partner's photo, pulled from a mutuals tag, because my partner's profiles are private, scribbling "This is the homewrecker" under it with arrows like a bad detective board. My phone lit up at 6 a.m. with screenshots from people who didn't owe me a warning but sent one anyway. By noon, the story was gone. She messaged me in the app a single line, "It's deleted." I replied that I'd documented it, and that any mention of my partner by name from her accounts would go to my lawyer. She left it on read. There's a different kind of silence when someone finally registers that you won't chase them into the maze. The strangest moment, though, came from a direction I hadn't anticipated. Her Tinder guy called me. Not a text, an actual call. I didn't recognize the number, answered, and he launched into this apologetic ramble about how he didn't know the whole situation and how he didn't want to get in the middle of co-parenting stuff. He told me he'd driven her home the night of the crisis call and that she'd thrown his phone out the passenger window because he wouldn't let her text me. He asked me if she was really off her meds again. I told him that was not a conversation I would have with him, and that if he was worried about her safety he should contact her family or the crisis line like any adult should. It felt like wiping a table clean, just a single pass once I realized I didn't have to argue or convince or perform. He sighed, thanked me, and hung up. 2 weeks later he wasn't at the exchange anymore. School got pulled into the undertow next. The guidance counselor emailed me asking if I could come in for a quick meeting about ensuring smooth pickups. My ex had gone to them first and said she didn't want my partner anywhere near the grounds. The counselor was completely unfazed. She'd apparently seen some version of us 100 times over. We set a simple protocol: each of us picks up on our day, and introductions to any new partners are to happen off campus. I left that office feeling absurdly grateful for fluorescent lights and laminated schedules. There's something about a process, even a boring one, that feels like a life raft when everything else has been vibes and improvisation. The part that scared me most, the one I'd been pushing further and further out, finally came up on its own. Our kid asked, in the backseat, if the woman I was seeing had a name. Not a warped question, not loaded, just curious the way kids are when there's a person in their orbit and they don't know where to place them. I didn't freeze. I said her name. I said she was my friend and that we were taking our time, and that when it made sense and everyone felt comfortable, I'd love for them to meet her. They nodded and asked if she liked dogs. I said she did. That was the whole conversation, and yet it felt like a door opening into air that didn't smell like smoke. I told my ex, through the app, that I planned to introduce our child to my partner in a low-key way in a few weeks. Public place, nothing overnight, I'd send details in advance. She replied with 3 messages in quick succession, all heat and warning, and then half an hour later a 4th that simply said, "Okay." When the day came, we fed ducks and talked about which ducks were leaders and which were followers and why some ducks seemed to be having their own private arguments on the edge of the pond. It was 2 hours of nothing happening, which felt like everything happening. My partner was easy with my kid in a way that didn't make me clench around the edges. When I dropped my kid off afterward, my ex opened the door, looked over my shoulder like she could see the pond from her hallway, and said, "Was it fine?" I said, "Yes." She nodded and closed the door. I won't pretend there's a bow on this. There are still the stray 1 a.m. messages that I don't answer until morning, still the way my heart stutters when my phone rings at a time it shouldn't, still the knowledge that the ground can shift under my feet without warning. But the ghost of that letter doesn't sit on my shoulder anymore. The threat doesn't have teeth when it's already been spoken out loud to the one person it could have hurt. And maybe this is the part that feels most unreal. Given the last year, the chaos is no longer the engine of my days. It's background noise. My days have other engines now, making pancakes with my kid, planning small, ordinary things with someone who sees me and is not trying to twist me into something that fits her panic. The last text I got from my ex this week was about a field trip permission slip. No insinuations, no baiting. Just due Friday. I filled it out and sent it back in our kid's backpack with a note that said, "Thanks." It felt like saying, thanks to the universe for the first quiet minute in a very long time. It might not last, I know that. But I'm learning that a minute is still a minute. You can build a life out of those. The minutes did stack up. I didn't notice until a whole week went by without anything catching fire. I cooked pancakes twice. My partner and I bought a basil plant and named it, which felt like the kind of joke people make when they don't expect disasters to knock. I found myself humming in the car. It felt dangerous, like tempting weather. Then the app pinged at 6:58 a.m. on a Friday. Request swap this weekend? Work training. No extra barbs. I said yes because saying yes to reasonable things is the only way the reasonable box gets any weight to it. We swapped. I took our kid to the science museum. We touched the metal globe that makes your hair lift and laughed about it in the reflection. I took a photo and didn't send it to anyone. Sunday night I waited at the station. 10 minutes. 20. 30. No show. The app blinked emergency, can't make it. Keep this overnight. My kid was already asleep when the message arrived. I typed marking as no show. Will deliver to school in the morning. I stopped writing feelings into boxes that didn't want them. On Monday, the guidance counselor asked if I had a minute after drop-off. She closed her office door like she closes doors a dozen times a day and told me our kid had told her they'd made dinner for themselves at their mom's because she was very sleepy. The word sleepy did its gentlest work. I nodded. I said I'd document. The counselor thanked me with the practiced warmth of someone who has handed a lot of parents a lot of small stones and watched them carry them out to the car. That night my ex sent a paragraph about meds and side effects and trying. No apologies this time, just a request that I keep our kid 2 extra days to be safe. I said yes, and I wrote a separate message proposing a temporary schedule while she adjusted to the medication and DBT. She replied no, then 20 minutes later, okay. The okay felt like a coin dropping in a jar we barely knew we had. It was our kid who said it aloud first. We were sorting Lego on my rug, their project, my back, both of us trying to make order out of a color explosion, when they said, casually, Mom's going to have a baby. They didn't look up, like this new fact had been set on the table with the red bricks. I asked if that made them feel big or small. They said both. We sat on both. I found out the rest the way I find out most things lately. 2 sentences on the app. I'm pregnant. Due in winter. Then nothing. No demand, no accusation. I told my partner that night. She went quiet in that way she does when her brain is building rooms around the information until it fits. She asked what our kid needed. We made a plan that was not a plan so much as a bunch of soft edges, extra check-ins, a bedtime book about families changing, and I would take on more midweek pickups until the new baby came if my ex wanted that. When I wrote that in the app, the reply was just, thank you. A week later, she asked me if she could move 2 hours north after the baby was born, closer to his family, better help, cheaper rent. The words were careful but the message was a spark rolled across dry grass. I told her I couldn't agree to a relocation, and I said it in the voice the judge would want to read. I called my lawyer that afternoon at my desk and listened to him sigh a lawyer's sigh and say we'd need something formal in place. The courthouse carpets are the exact shade of gray that hides every spill and feels like a long hallway even when you're standing still. We sat on opposite benches, not talking. Her hand was on her stomach. Mine was on a paper cup that said coffee in a font that had given up. When our case was called, the judge looked like he enjoyed rules more than drama, which is the exact face I'd been hoping for. He ordered no relocation without agreement or court approval, exchanges to remain at the station, and a parenting coordinator for 12 months who has no interest in either of your narratives. I almost laughed at that. It felt like someone had turned the volume down in the room by reaching behind the curtain and flipping a switch. The Tinder guy didn't come to the next 2 exchanges. Then he did, and leaned against his car like the set piece he thought he was, and asked if I felt good, taking a father's kid away. I checked the station camera with my eyes without moving my head and told him I'd only be speaking to the other parent. He kicked the gravel once like it owed him money and got back in his car. That was the end of that. School did a spring concert. Tiny chairs, gym bleachers, a canvas banner painted with stars. Our kid had a paper hat and sang 2 lines slightly late and grinned at me after each one like they were throwing a baseball and waiting to see if I'd catch it. I clapped from somewhere deep in my chest. Afterward, in the crush of parents and wilted crafts, my ex and I ended up shoulder to shoulder by the water fountain. She passed me a tissue without looking at me. I don't know if she saw the wet on my face or she was just being tactical. It didn't matter. For 2 minutes we were just 2 people in a hot gym whose kid had remembered all the words. It didn't hold. A few days later, the app pinged with a message at 1:13 a.m. that read, I'm scared. I didn't answer then. At 6:30 I wrote, if you're in danger call 911. If you need resources, here are 3. I attached the crisis line and a women's shelter number. At 9 she wrote back, we broke up. He punched a hole in the closet and then cried. Then, I'm okay. Then, can you keep, kid, tonight? I have to go to the doctor. I wrote yes before I thought about it. Later that day a police car idled outside my office for no reason except the reason my brain supplied, and I had to touch the cool metal of a filing cabinet to make my hands stay still. Child Protective Services came on a Wednesday, which I'd assumed was a day like other days until two people with laminated badges stood in my doorway and asked if they could ask us some questions. They were kind in that trained way that doesn't spill. I told them what I knew and refused to add what I didn't. One of them took notes with a pen that clicked too loudly for the size of my kitchen. Our kid watched cartoons on low volume and told one of the investigators facts about space while eating baby carrots. The agency talked to my ex, too. She wrote me later, "Did you call them?" I wrote, "The school did because they are mandatory reporters." I answered their questions. She left it. 2 days later another message, "Thank you for not lying." 4 days after that, a link to a DBT group schedule with a circled time slot. The parenting coordinator is a woman who uses words like compliance and interim like she's ordering lunch. She got us on a rotating calendar that calculates itself and doesn't care about how we feel, which is a relief. She made a rule that any introductions to partners on both sides must be communicated with at least 7 days notice and a brief plan. My ex sent a 2-sentence message to say she'd like to introduce our kid to her friend Jess at the park on Saturday. My chest braced. Saturday came and went without a follow-up complaint. On Monday, our kid said, "I met Jess. She likes frogs." I said, "Frogs are solid." My partner asked if she could leave a sweater at my place, the kind of question that is and isn't about fabric. I said yes and then realized the sweater had been there for weeks, folded on the back of a chair where she'd put it on nights she got cold. The domestic shorthand was happening whether we named it or not. I met her parents on a Sunday afternoon that smelled like cut grass. Her dad asked me about soccer and I was honest that I didn't understand offsides. He said, "No one does," and poured me iced tea. The next thing didn't explode so much as topple. At the next prenatal appointment, her new OB told her she had to stop the medication she'd finally been tolerating because of a risk they weren't comfortable with. That night my phone lit the darkness of my bedroom with the shape of her name. "I can't sleep," the message said, and there was nothing in that sentence to argue with. I set my phone face down and listened to the heavy silence of my house. I did not drive anywhere. I did not type life rafts into a conversation that would teach me the old choreography again. In the morning there was a message waiting that said, "I didn't do anything. I'm making a list," and then a photo of a page with call doc. Drink water. Walk. Breakfast. Shower. Breathe, written in a handwriting I know like a signature. It was the first list of hers I'd seen that wasn't a map into me. Field day came with red team shirts and sunburned noses and popsicles that stained tongues. My ex stood behind the rope with all the other parents and yelled our kid's name at the right times. When our kid ran the sack race they fell once, hard, and popped up laughing. I didn't look to see if she was laughing, too. I assumed she was. At the end, the teacher handed me a permission slip for the pediatric dentist. My ex's message on the app said she'd already scheduled it. We were, once again, two trains somehow on the same track without colliding for a few stops. Last week my kid asked if they could take my partner's dog for a walk. It wasn't a question any court had to answer, just a sidewalk one. We went together at dusk and watched the dog try to be everywhere at once. My kid's hand in mine felt like the most present thing in the world. We stopped to look at a snail and didn't rush it. That's the kind of minute I want to build with, the ones where nothing needs fixing because nothing is broken in that exact second. I don't know what winter will look like. I don't know what babies do to old patterns or new ones. I do know that the last message on the app this morning was about sunscreen for the field trip and whether we had the good kind that doesn't sting. Eyes. I wrote back that I did and sent a photo of the tube so she could buy the same one if she wanted. It felt like throwing a very small bridge across a very wide river. It didn't sink. The bridge held for a while. Long enough that I forgot to look down at the water when I crossed it. We did sunscreen and field trips and a dentist appointment where our kid got a tiny plastic ring out of a treasure box and wore it on a thumb like a captain. My partner's sweater started living on the back of a chair as if it had always been assigned that job. I didn't realize how much quiet had accumulated until the noise returned in a shape I wasn't ready for. A nurse called me on a Tuesday afternoon from a number that didn't look like a number, all zeros and a blocky unknown. She asked if I could authorize a thing I didn't understand because my wife was in labor. I had to swallow the word X, which is not a word that plays well with contractions on the other end of a phone. I told her I wasn't authorized to authorize anything like that and she paused, then said, "You're listed as spouse and primary. Insurance is a slow river. Paperwork is a glacier." I was in my office, which smells like old paper and one plant that refuses to die. I told the nurse I would be there to fix the forms. My partner drove because my hands decided they were new to steering. The hospital had floors that could have been in any hospital anywhere, speckled tile built to be invisible. I went to the desk and spelled my name 3 times and said divorce twice and I just need to make sure our older child is okay once. A social worker with a scarf that looked like a sunset asked me if I was okay. I said yes in the same tone you use when someone asks if you need anything from the store while you're standing in a store. They walked me as far as double doors I wasn't going to go through. Her mom's name was written on a whiteboard with a little heart next to it. Mine wasn't anywhere. The sunset scarf asked if I wanted to wait. I said I would wait down the hall. My partner sat with me in a row of chairs designed to discourage sleep. We watched a cartoon fox dance silently on a wall-mounted TV with the captions turned off. I texted the parenting app that I had been called by the hospital because I was listed as the emergency contact and that I was available to keep our kid as long as needed. The app marked it as delivered like a machine that stamps time on the world and doesn't care that the world is moving. Her mom came out once, surprised and then not. Her eyes were the kind of tired that doesn't come from the day. She said, they had the nurses fix the paperwork, which sat between us as neutral as a chair. She asked if I could pick our kid up from school and keep them overnight. I said yes. She touched my arm like a person testing whether a stove is hot and went back through the doors. It was not my scene. I was grateful for a door to keep me out of it. Our kid met their sister the next afternoon. I was a perimeter. Hospitals make me feel like a substitute in a class that already knows the rules. The baby made the scratchy kitten noises babies make. Our kid said, she smells like a penny, and then, she's so small it makes my eyes hurt. I nodded like that was a normal sentence. It kind of was. The new boyfriend wasn't there. No one said why. On the drive home our kid asked if the baby could come to the science museum someday. I said I bet the baby would love the windy room where your hair does the static thing when she was older. We made plans for a person who had only been alive for 20 hours, and it was the kind of plan that makes time feel honest. The next exchange went fine until it didn't. He was back, leaning against his car like the idea of a person who leans against cars, and he was trying to look like he belonged in a photograph of himself. He started in with the comments that look harmless in transcripts and aren't harmless in the air. I didn't respond. The camera above the police station door blinked the way it always blinks. When I got home my taillight was a honeycomb of red shards. I went back, showed the front desk the video from my dash and the tiny shiver from the station camera that caught a figure moving too close to my bumper. They said they'd make a record. It's not much, but it's a ledger that exists somewhere outside of us. The parenting coordinator wrote no third-party involvement at exchanges pending resolution in a sentence that made my shoulders drop an inch. He didn't show up after that. Sleep was a visitor for everyone. The app turned into a nursery monitor. Can you keep, kid, 2 more nights? Doctor wants me to rest. Formula brand? I answered what I could answer and screenshot what I couldn't. Our kid started calling the baby by a nickname that sounded like a secret handshake. In the morning rush one day I found the tiny ring from the dentist on the bathroom counter next to a glass with a toothbrush leaning out like it was trying to hear something. I carried it to the dresser and put it in a small dish with 3 pennies and a Lego hand. It felt like I had made a museum of small circles. A different call came a week later. Not the hospital this time, a detective who said his name slowly, twice, and asked if I could answer a couple of questions about a disturbance at an apartment 2 blocks from the school. I told him what I had already told the parenting coordinator and the app in the sky. I knew he'd punched a closet door at least once, and cried after. I had seen the hole. I had no information about that night beyond the messages I'd received asking me to take our kid. He said, thank you in a voice that had thanked a lot of people who didn't want to be talking to him. After we hung up, I took the long way to my car and walked past 3 different trees like a person who suddenly wanted to catalog bark. The courthouse wanted us again. Not for relocation this time, an emergency hearing to make sure the orders covered a newborn in a storm. The same gray carpet, different day. The judge's tie had tiny sailboats on it, which felt like the judge had made a joke just for himself. He added a line that the infant had no bearing on the schedule with our kid, that contact with the infant would be by agreement only until further notice, that exchanges would continue under the cameras, that third parties were to stay ghosts. He said the words status quo and best interests the way people say their last name when they spell it on the phone. I wrote status quo in my notes and underlined it once. There were softer upgrades, too. Our kid wanted to bring a picture they had drawn to the next visit, a lopsided baby with a round, amazed mouth. We bought a frame at a big box store with a light that hums. They held the frame on their lap like it might slip away. When we got to the building with the automatic doors, our kid marched like they knew exactly where to go. I waited in the parking lot like a set piece. On the way back to my car, her mother texted she liked the picture, and it was the kind of sentence that should be nothing and isn't. My partner asked if she could come to the science museum with us the following weekend. I said yes and then realized that yes came out of me like a reflex, not like a calculation. We stood under the giant dinosaur skeleton while our kid explained evolution to us as if they'd been there to take minutes when the earth tried different shapes. My partner and our kid took turns pressing buttons to make a simulated volcano glow. I watched their shoulders lean together the way shoulders do when people are interested in the same button. It felt like a small prayer made out of plastic and electricity. The quiet didn't last. It never does, but this time it broke in a way I wouldn't have guessed. I got an email from the school nurse flagged with the red exclamation point. Our kid had shown up without a coat on a rainy morning, shirt damp at the edges, and when asked said, the baby cried all night and we forgot. The word forgot put a hand on my chest. I wrote the coordinator and offered midweek mornings until further notice. My ex replied, thank you, then 5 minutes later, I'm trying. Both things could be true at the same time without canceling either out. She sent me a photo one night, not of the baby, but of a sheet of paper with boxes on it. Sleep. Shower. Eat. Check. The handwriting was the same as the list that had said breathe, but the lines were straighter. It made me think of those studies where people learn to write with their non-dominant hand and then look at the letters like they came from a stranger. I wrote back, "Glad you have support." She sent a thumbs up, which is a wild thing to receive from someone who once weaponized punctuation. I took it anyway. Then the extraordinary ordinary thing. At a Monday exchange, the baby was there. Not in my lane, not my responsibility, not my anything, but there, in a little carrier with a blanket that had been washed so many times it had given up on being a color. Our kid stared and did not touch until invited. "Gentle hands," her mom said. Our kid put a finger on the baby's glove, which was the size of a walnut, and said, "Your hand is like a moth." I didn't know where they keep sentences like that in their body, but I was glad their body had a drawer for it. I waved at the baby in the way grown-ups wave at babies to prove they are not a danger, and then I buckled our kid and left. On the way home, the sky was doing that trick where it can't decide if it's done raining. We got caught in a sunshower and laughed because it felt like a mistake the weather made and then decided to keep. The next flare was social and stupid and still sharp. Someone sent me a screenshot of a post from the boyfriend's brother's account, all elbows and insinuation about deadbeat dads. It wasn't about me, but it could have been, and it was attached to a photo taken at the station that wasn't supposed to be anyone's content. My lawyer sent a 2-paragraph letter with confident margins. The post went away like posts do when consequences show up. I didn't mark a win. I made dinner. Our kid asked for noodles again. I made noodles again. There is a certain holiness to repetition. The parenting coordinator scheduled a joint session on Zoom. Her face was a square next to our squares, and we all looked like people who'd been pulled into a meeting by a calendar, not by desire. She said, "You will both follow the orders. You will both communicate in the app. You will not weaponize the baby or the partner." She said it like a bartender reciting house rules. My ex nodded. I nodded. The coordinator asked us each to say out loud what would happen if one of us needed extra help. I said, "I will take the overnights if asked, and I will document." My ex said, "I will ask." It was the smallest contract and still a contract. I wrote it down in my notebook next to status quo like I was making a recipe. I wish I could say the alarm stopped. They didn't. There was a 2:17 a.m. message that said, "I can hear my heart too loud." I didn't respond then. At 7 I wrote, "Call your doctor. If you are in crisis, go to the ER." At 9:10 she sent a photo of her wrist with a hospital bracelet around it and the words "I went." I showed my partner the message. She put the car keys on the counter like a person putting down a weapon they hadn't realized they were carrying. Our kid and I walked the dog in the evening and checked on the basil plant and decided it was thriving because it had been named. They told me their baby sister grabbed their hair like a tiny crab and it hurt and they didn't mind and could they have pancakes tomorrow. I said yes to pancakes because pancakes are how you tell a nervous system that the morning is not a threat. We stood in the kitchen flipping circles of batter while the coffee machine made its small, responsible noises. The app pinged once about a pediatric appointment and once about a field trip chaperone list. I signed up for Tuesday. The permission slip went back in the backpack with a note that read, "I can do pickup if needed." The last thing that happened this week felt like a magic trick where the magician shows you the empty hat. The app lit up with her name and just the sentence, "Thank you for keeping, kid, steady." No explanations, no bait, no barbed wire hidden in the grass. I wrote back, "That's the job," and looked at the words after I sent them. It felt like the first time in a very long time that I had named what I was actually doing without apology or armor. I don't know the shape of next week or how many minutes it will hold or drop. I do know that tonight the basil smells loud when you crush a leaf between your fingers, and my kid's Lego city has a hospital with a tiny red cross on it and no doors because the engineer decided doors got in the way of people getting where they needed to go. I'm trying to build like that, less flourish, more function, enough room for everyone to move without bumping into the sharp parts. The app's last message was a photo of a bottle of infant Tylenol and the question, "Do you have this brand?" I sent back a picture of the same bottle from my cabinet. Small bridge, wide river. Still holding.